So one of the researchers who really impacted my perspective on the necessity for psychiatric medication and antidepressants specifically is Dr. Irving Kirsch. And essentially what his research demonstrated was that, again, he had to unearth unpublished data because psychiatry likes to put a lot of inconvenient data and outcomes in the locked file cabinet. Antidepressants have over 1,000 randomized trials. They're some of the best studied medications out there. But actually, when you analyze, which he did statistically, the impact of what's called the active placebo effect, which is the set of, we now understand to be complex psychoneuroimmunologic effects of the belief that a medication is taking hold and having an impact. When you account for that, which is induced when patients experience side effects in a trial where they're given either a medication or a sugar pill, right? So in the treatment arm, the patient begins to have dry mouth, headache, and some constipation, and they say, oh, I'm in the treatment arm. I'm going to get better in all those ways, that the pharmaceutical industry told me on TV and in print magazines that I'm going to get better. And they do to some extent, right? So what he found was that 82% of what we are calling drug effect is actually totally reduplicated by placebo. So what we are looking at as the drug's effect is clinically insignificant. And maybe all that these trials are is placebo versus like a supercharged placebo. And that even in the most severe depression, where there is some 10% separation from placebo in terms of efficacy, that what's actually happening is the placebo is having less effect. So it's not actually that the medication is more effective in any meaningful way. So this is pretty provocative stuff, right? And if I hadn't already been in a position where I was reevaluating much of the dogma that I had assumed during my training, I would have been extremely defensive about it. And the Guild of Psychiatry was in uproar when his papers came out. And we were taught actually to parrot these catchphrases around why his research was meaningless and insignificant and not relevant to a real patient population in the actual outpatient setting. But the truth is that it can't be ignored. And so we have to ask, okay, so what are patients actually experiencing then? Why is it that some patients believe that they're getting better? Okay, so maybe it's actually because they believe that they're getting better, and and that these shifts in their physiology actually lead them to have a whole cascade of events that actually do facilitate some improvement. Maybe it's also that these medications have chemical effects, and that in some patients, at least initially, those chemical effects are desirable. Maybe the medication is sedating. Maybe it's energizing in just the right way, right? So in the same way that an anxious patient might drink 2 shots of vodka and actually feel very calm on their way to a party they would otherwise feel very socially anxious about, we're observing a chemical effect, and it would be dangerous to assume that that chemical effect is reflecting an innate imbalance, right? Or that we should recommend that chemical for long-term treatment, right? Because in the instance of alcohol, of course, we know that any sort of anxiolytic effect isn't because the patient is struggling with an alcohol deficiency that's then resolved, right? And it would be questionable to recommend based on short-term relief, long-term consumption of alcohol for prevention and prophylaxis, right? We know that intuitively.